Hey guys, welcome back, and this week it's more work on the interior. So last week, as you know, I did my door trim, and two mixed reviews. Some of you love it, some of you absolutely hate it. I think once it's done, it'll come together quite nicely. Obviously, there is all the hardware to go on there. I've got something interesting I'm thinking of doing with the armrests, but that will come in a later episode, and I think it'll all start tying together. Although I am now reconsidering potentially the carpet. I'll leave it for now, but I might actually come back and change the carpet into something that matches this leather a little bit more closely in the future. Hold your judgment till the end, and then you can blame me up. But the next part I've got to tackle is this panel here. So moving backwards around the car, I'll come down to these panels. One of the things I looked at when I was building my interior is I knew I wanted to keep these panels, and I also wanted to fit the roll cage. And I did design it so that the roll cage can fit, and this panel will deflect enough so the roll cage will fit in there nicely. What I didn't really think about is I think that it will squeak against this panel. So I actually got this idea stolen from one of the Singer cars because, let's face it, as we all know, they are the best of the best. What I've decided to do is I'm planning on actually taking a chunk out of this panel and trimming it still to wrap around the roll cage. So that means putting the roll cage back in, marking it up, and then we'll get stuck into working out how I'm going to do this. Alright, so you saw me messing around there, playing around, and I've marked some lines on this panel to work out exactly where the roll cage sits. And I'm going to trim out this piece here now. So I've cut my slot out where the roll cage is going to sit, and basically now on the back of this panel there's a big gaping hole, and what I want to make is a curved section to fill this in, and then I'll trim in around that curved section. So to make that curved section, I've sort of done a little bit of head scratching, and what I'm come up with is I'm going to use a piece of this 3mm MDF, but I'm going to score grooves in the back of it so that I can curve it by hand, and then I can place it in there. Somehow still yet to work out how I'm going to do that, but attach that in behind, and then I can trim over it, and I've got my solid backing for it. Alright, well, that didn't work, so it's time to come up with another plan. Obviously the wooden template didn't work, so I've gone through and I've made up a little cardboard template and worked out exactly how it's going to sit in there. So it's got a bit of a curve in there, a nice little divot for the roll cage to run down through. So from this, I then have to go and transfer this piece over onto a piece of sheet metal, cut it out, bend it up, and hopefully it'll sit in here quite nicely. Now, this will hopefully give you a bit of a better idea of what I was trying to do. So you can see now, there is space all the way around the cage. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think that looks really good. Before I even do the other side, I'll just finish this up, trim the whole thing, and see what it looks like. Alright, so you can see that I cut all the foam out, and now I've laid the original piece of vinyl back over the top. to get an idea, because I'm going to use this piece of vinyl as the pattern for the leather piece I need to cut out. But I also need to cut out another piece to sew into this area here. To do that, I have to make a pattern of that piece, so then I can then go and cut it out of the leather and sew it all together. So I marked out the little extra piece of vinyl that I need, and I put some reference marks onto these and then transfer them over onto the back where they're a little bit more clearly marked. And these I'll transfer over onto my leather piece. When I go to sew everything together, I can line up these reference marks and make sure everything is going to go together perfectly. Alright, I've laid my leather over the top, and I've got my little cutout marked out, but what I need to do with this cutout is I need to add a sewing allowance on this. I've got a little bit of to sew together. Alright, another little issue before I go into my sewing is I've been complaining about my sewing machine because it is far too sensitive. Basically, the tiniest little movement of my foot will translate into the thing flying away. So I've had a quick look, and it looks like it should be a pretty simple fix. Basically, the motor is run by this lever here, and it's stuck into the end of this pedal here. So if I remove this pin and drill a new hole halfway between the two, it should halve the sensitivity of the throttle. Alright, so I've got my pieces of leather I've got to sew together. I'm going to line up my reference points, and then I'm going to staple them together. What the staples will do, it'll keep it all together and in line while I'm working, and it's much easier than using pins. Alright, that came up pretty good in the end, and it's not quite neat enough for me. What I want to do is, of course I need to make it more difficult for myself, and sewing around this top edge, I did the whole thing turning the machine by hand because it was so tight and difficult with the puckering leather. But now what I'm going to try and do is I want to have double stitching the whole way around it, don't I? So let's see how that goes. Alright, as you might be able to see there, that's all stuck down now. But hopefully now I can go back through and do some double stitching. Alright, and that is my first attempt at double stitching. It's far from perfect. Okay, so now let's try and stick it all together. Another thing I came up with, and I've just realised, is how do you trim this piece and then staple this on without seeing the staples over the trimming? At least the method I've worked out how to do it is I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to lay the trimming over it, but I'm not going to glue it down. Wrap it underneath and glue it on the back, be able to peel it back, staple it in, and then stick it on the front. So it's a bit of messing around, but I think that's the way I've worked out how I can get it to work. Let me take you through what I've done here. So I've cut out my piece of foam that'll go perfectly over the top of this piece. An extra little thing to make things more difficult for myself is because I've used this piece of tartan, I just can't put it on anywhere. It really needs to match up the whole way around the car. I've lined the white line up and I put a mark on this panel which roughly lines up to the mark on the door trim. So I can follow this same trim line all the way around the car, so hopefully it all matches in together nicely. Alright, that was a long day, a whole day just to do this one trim panel, but it's really come together in the end, I think. Now I have to get on to the other one. But at least I've done one, and I know I can do one, so the other one should go a bit easier than this one. Alright, so I have 2 panels done now. So the next part I need to tackle is this rear panel here. As I explained last week, this top part is going to stay in the black vinyl. The lower part is going to be leather with a strip of purple tartan across the top here. Alright, as you can see here, this panel is pretty busted up and looks pretty terrible. So I'm going to replace this one. This lower one actually looks like it's still in fair condition, so I'll probably leave it for now. This wouldn't be easy to recreate this curved piece, so that's definitely staying as well. So I'll just take this piece off and pull it apart and get ready to start retrimming it. So I've retrimmed this curved pad and also the top pad, which is going to sit on here. So I've got to go through the same process as the side panels because the staples need to be obviously hidden underneath here. Let's staple it all together. So that pillar still needs to be trimmed, and I'll just probably do it straight in the leather, but you can sort of start getting the idea of the interior. It's all coming together. That dash pad at the back is obviously all nicely freshly done. I'm really happy with how everything's coming together. It's maybe it's not to everybody's taste, but that's what I envisioned, and once the roll cage goes in, I think it'll all match in nicely, and it's the more it takes shape, I think the more sense it will make. That must mean it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hi guys, okay, fun fact of the day. Did you know China has now surpassed the USA as the largest buyer of Porsches? So at the moment it's China, followed by the USA in second place, and then thirdly Germany. It's harder to find facts for Australia because we tend to be clumped in with Asia Pacific, that is the rest of Asia that's not China, Africa and the Middle East. Also, interestingly, the SUV is now the most popular model of Porsche sold. It's the Macan #1, followed by the Cayenne.
Alright guys, that is it for another week. It took a lot longer than I thought, and I've really got to get back out and start doing some editing. So, as always, if you're enjoying the videos, please like and subscribe to my channel, Homebuilt by Jeff, and you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at the same place. See you guys.
Bye guys.
Bye. You were really sitting in here. Your head like this.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Yeah. Ooh. Back in.
It's cozy.
It's cozy. Yeah.
Very cozy.
There's no room. Imagine the seats are here. There's no
room at all. This is really not very comfortable.
It's really not a full seater.
It's not a car you could like drive with a few friends with it.
No.
Unless they were very small friends.